Welcome to Life 100 Podcast. I am Rosie and it's great to be with you again. How does a late autism diagnosis can change the story of a person's life? Today on Women Leading with Purpose, we are honored to welcome Dr. Jessica Mysz, a licensed psychologist who specializes in diagnosing autism in both children and adults. She guides us through the profound impact a late diagnosis can have, offering new understanding, resources, and hope. So whether you are seeking answers for yourself or someone you love, this conversation is filled with wisdom and the tools available to become a powerful advocate. Doctor, welcome to the show and tell us more about your specialty.
I am Jessica Mysz. I'm a psychologist in the Chicago area, and I have a private practice called the Health and Healing Center. And my main goal in my practice is to provide neurodiversity affirming psychological evaluation for children and adults, and also share resources that can be helpful for autistic people. I commonly work with some of the more subtle presentations of autism, so PDA and high masking autism, often in adults who have always felt a little bit different, but not quite understood why. And I started my practice in early 2020, and since then I've been working with a lot of different people and also provide information online on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, just to continue to educate people about what autism is, because for many people, it is not necessarily what they thought.
Exactly. And one of the questions that I received from our listeners is, what is the power or impact of late diagnosis? Also, what resources are available? And what can be done to be a strong advocate for yourself or someone you love? What can you share with us?
First of all, especially if you're a teenager or adult and you believe that you might be autistic, I think the first step is to do some research. And what's exciting about right now is there are a lot of online quizzes. They're free little tests that people can take. Some of the really big ones are the RAADS-R, the CAT-Q, and the ASPIE quiz are some of the big ones that are out there, and they're free. They're really easy to take and just to see, okay, is this something that might be worth pursuing for me? And I do think a lot of people take one of these tests thinking, oh, it's probably going to be nothing, and come back with a really high score and realize, okay, maybe there might be something here. And so I'd say if this is you, if you start noticing that, okay, maybe there might be something to check out, then I encourage people to check out some other things. So check out some of the books that are out there. There are some really great books. One of the big ones is Unmasking Autism by Devon. And there's a lot of creators on some of these other social media apps. And I think for a lot of people, it's really helpful to start looking at what people are talking about as they describe their own experiences as being neurodiverse. And so for a lot of people, they start recognizing, oh, wait, I do that. Oh, yeah, that's something that really resonates with me. And if you start getting along that line, then it might make sense to get an evaluation. So that's usually where I come in or other professionals come in. And I would say, especially if you are high masking, which just means that it's a less obvious presentation to other people, then it's really important to find somebody who is going to assess for masking and somebody who is confident and competent in assessing adults, because there's still a lot of professionals out there who work with children and sort of expect to see this very stereotypical view. And for most adults, it doesn't necessarily look like that. So as to your other question, so what's the point of getting an evaluation? Why do all this? And I think there's a couple of really big reasons that people choose to get evaluated. So honestly, the biggest one is just for that self-understanding. And I think that for a lot of people, if they haven't understood if they were neurodiverse, they still notice that something is different. They've still noticed that, this thing seems to be a lot harder for me, or man, everybody else seems to just get this and it takes me longer to do. And the sad thing is, I think people who haven't necessarily recognized that this was because of neurodivergent, they often think, oh, well, maybe I'm just not as smart as everybody else, or maybe I'm just lazy, or there's something wrong with me. And that has a huge impact on your self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. And so for a lot of people, having that diagnosis just gives them the information to be more confident and to feel better about doing some accommodations and giving themselves a little bit of grace when it comes to some, different situations and challenges. On top of that, I have a lot of people who maybe in their job or maybe they are going to school and they find that they need some accommodations. Those can look very different depending on what they're doing. Sometimes it's because they really benefit from having a very predictable schedule. And so rather than the job being able to change everything every single week, okay, we can accommodate that. And the job can say, okay, yes, you can have this very predictable schedule because we know that works well for you. For somebody in school, it might be having a separate room to do tests. It might be having some help with note taking. I mean, there's a wide variety because everybody's different. But I think that those are sometimes really helpful accommodations for people. And then the final one is, I think, oftentimes sharing with friends and family. Self-diagnosis is accepted in the autism community because it is a hard thing getting an evaluation. It's not accessible to everybody. And so many people do self-diagnose and recognize, okay, yep, this sounds exactly like me. And okay, I'm autistic. Unfortunately, many of these people, as they share with other friends or family members, sometimes those friends and family members are less accepting or they say, well, what's the evidence? How do you know? And so I think for those people, sometimes it's really helpful to say, yep, I have this evidence here. Shouldn't need it, but unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, that is an important part of their process.
And it's so powerful when you understand that the information is processed in a different way. And that gives us the opportunity to understand their point of view. And what way can we be a strong advocate? What can we do in order to facilitate that understanding, that confirmation that, yes, definitely, I know there was something different? What can we do as advocates?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think some of the big things, if there's somebody in your life who's autistic and you want to support them, I think the biggest one is education. So taking it upon yourself to learn more about what autism means and how to support somebody. One of the things that many autistic people experience is burnout. Another thing is meltdowns or shutdowns. And so if there's somebody in your life who is struggling, if they're having a hard time, it's really nice if you can offer them support. And sometimes in that moment, it is really hard to know exactly what types of supports might be helpful. And so it can even be a great conversation to have when things are good. Hey, when you're struggling, when you're kind of emotionally dysregulated, how can I support you? Do you want me to sit beside you? Do you want me to give you space? Do you want me to bring you something to drink? I think that there are some really easy things, and it's important to be able to do what they need in that moment. I think many autistic people find themselves in the position of having to educate the people around them about what that is. And so that can be a really hard thing for somebody already to be kind of trying to manage their own life and then also educating other people around them. And so the more that you can take that on yourself, the better. And I think it's also good to pay attention to the autism community. So there is pretty strong autism community, which I think is fantastic. And I think that it's especially helpful for parents of autistic children to listen to adults with autism. So being able to hear about, okay, what these adults, what do they say about this particular type of therapy? What are they saying about how this felt when they were kids? Because I think parents are trying to do the best things for their kids. They're trying to give them resources, give them support. But sometimes it's hard to know. And we know that there is disconnect between neurotypical people and neurodiverse people. And so it's this idea, it's called the double empathy problem, that autistic people tend to understand autistic people and neurotypical people tend to really understand neurotypical people. But there is this disconnect when there's a neurodivergent people and a holistic person. And so being able to just be open and listen to what people are saying, I think is incredibly important.
And thinking about that, for the person who is neurodiverse, when they go to the doctor, what do you suggest to have a successful consultation, having to balance that masking and also to disclose the way that they are feeling on a particular condition that they might have? How do you balance those two, between the masking and to be authentic, those two things?
Yeah. And I think that's a really hard balance to find. And I do find a lot of the autistic clients that I've had, talk about medical appointments specifically as being a time where they do feel like they have to mask very strongly. And I think part of that is people have to advocate for what they need, and they have to advocate for what they're looking for and in terms of medical needs. And it's a hard balance. So I think if you're coming in and you're looking for support specifically for autism, you have to be authentic. You have to be able to share. And that's part of the evaluation that I do, because I think it's not always very obvious. And I think for a lot of people, it's almost involuntary. I had one client share, and I think this is like the best analogy. She said, trying to unmask is almost like letting myself pee my pants. That it's something, I've gone a lifetime not doing, because of course not. And so the idea of relaxing and letting go that much is terrifying and really uncomfortable. And that's why in my evaluation process, I ask a lot about it. I ask about, what is it like when you make eye contact with other people? How much do you feel like you're the same person if you're with other people or just by yourself? And there's some differences there. And I think, if you're getting an evaluation, those are important things to talk about. But as for, medical appointments, we also know that sometimes people who are unmasked might not be treated as well, might not be treated as fairly by different medical providers. And so I think the really important thing is to try to identify providers who are going to be open to that, providers who are competent and work with a lot of autistic clients, just because they are not necessarily going to judge a book by its cover.
And let me go back to something that you mentioned, the places that a person can go online. What are these resources? And I'm going to add those links in the episode description as well. But can you say again, what are those places that people can go to get this type of resources?
Yes, absolutely. So the quizzes that I mentioned are the CAT-Q, the RAADS-R, which is RAADS-R, and the ASPIE quiz. And a really good source of information for those quizzes is the website embraceautism.com. It's a Canadian psychologist, and she has some great websites and great information on her site.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And what will be the best way to get in touch with you for more information?
Yeah, great. It's been so nice. So for people who are considering an evaluation, and we do in-person evaluations in Chicago, but we also do telehealth evaluations in many states. Our practice website is healthandhealingcenter.com. But if you are interested and just want to see what types of information I'm sharing online, on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, I post information at Dr. Jessica Mysz.
Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. And I'm looking forward to continue learning from you on your social media and also on the blog.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a great conversation, and thank you for sharing this message, for being part of this journey, of this community. And I invite you to visit her social media that is full of insight and inspiration. And once again, thank you for listening, and leave a comment, and subscribe. Follow us, because like I always say, life is better when we live it at 100.